The day my husband threw me out for his lover, he thought he was humiliating a helpless wife. He had no idea he had just discarded the secret heiress to $1 billion.
12 years, this is how it ends?
Love didn't disappear overnight. It slowly faded into lies, secrets, and broken promise until another woman took her place.
You deserve someone who understands your future.
Our marriage has been over for a long time.
Welcome home, Ms. Brooks. Everything your grandmother built now belongs to you.
My grandmother was telling the truth?
The day my husband pointed toward the front gate and told me to leave, I bent down in silence to pick up the only suitcase he allowed me to keep. He believed he was throwing away a woman who had nowhere else to go. What he didn't know was that the old leather journal lying beside my bag contained a truth my late grandmother had begged me to keep hidden until the right moment. A truth worth billions that would soon change every life connected to mine. Some betrayals don't begin with shouting. They begin with small silences, with conversations that slowly disappear, with dinners eaten across the same table, while two strangers pretend to be husband and wife. Sometimes the person who breaks your heart isn't the one who stops loving you. It's the one who starts believing you no longer deserve respect. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Every story reminds us that strength often appears when life takes everything else away. If stories about resilience, justice, and second chances inspire you, don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable journeys. My name is Ariana Brooks, and for 12 years I believed that love was something you protected with patience. I was wrong. Sometimes the person you keep protecting is quietly preparing to destroy everything you've built together. The first thing everyone noticed about me was how ordinary I looked. No designer handbags, no expensive jewelry, no luxury cars, just comfortable clothes, sensible shoes, and a habit of smiling at strangers. My husband, Nathan Brooks, used to say that simplicity was one of the reasons he fell in love with me. "I never have to wonder if you love me for my money," he would joke during our early years together. Back then, we had almost nothing. He worked long shifts as a regional sales representative. I taught art classes at a community center, 3 afternoons every week, because helping children discover creativity made me happier than any corporate career ever could. Money was always tight, but laughter was abundant. On Friday nights, we'd buy inexpensive takeout, spread an old blanket across the living room floor, and dream about the future. "We'll build a beautiful life," Nathan would whisper, and I believed every word. There was one promise I had made years before meeting him, a promise I had never broken. When I turned 21, my grandmother Eleanor placed a worn leather journal into my hands. One day, she had said gently, "Someone may love you because of your heart." She looked directly into my eyes. "Don't let wealth become the reason." I laughed. "What wealth?" She smiled without answering. Instead, she made me promise never to discuss our extended family with anyone until she personally told me the time had come. I assumed it was simply another one of Grandma Eleanor's mysterious habits. She lived modestly. She volunteered at libraries. She baked pies for neighbors. Nothing about her suggested extraordinary fortune. So I tucked the journal safely away and rarely thought about it again. Nathan and I married 2 years later. Life wasn't glamorous. We rented a modest suburban house outside Charlotte. I planted flowers every spring. Nathan mowed the lawn every Saturday. Neighbors knew us as the dependable couple who always attended neighborhood cookouts. If anyone had asked whether we were happy, I would have answered yes without hesitation. Looking back now, I realize happiness can quietly fade while routine keeps pretending everything is normal. The first real crack appeared after Nathan received a promotion. His salary nearly doubled. His responsibilities expanded. His wardrobe changed. His conversations changed too. He started mentioning words like prestige, influence, image. Suddenly, every dinner became a discussion about successful people. "They all have ambition," he'd say. "They understand appearances matter." At first I laughed. "So now my gardening gloves embarrass you?" He smiled. "I'm just saying you've never cared much about success." The comment stung, not because it was cruel, because it misunderstood me completely. I didn't measure success by salary. I measured it by peace, by kindness, by sleeping well at night. Nathan had begun measuring something entirely different. Months later, he insisted we move into a larger neighborhood. The clients expect it. I wasn't convinced. Our old home held memories. The porch where we watched thunderstorms. The kitchen where we danced while making pancakes. The tiny backyard where neighborhood children helped me grow tomatoes every summer. But Nathan kept insisting. Eventually, I agreed. Marriage, I believed, required compromise. The new neighborhood was beautiful. Wide driveways, perfect lawns, luxury SUVs lined every street. Neighbors compared vacations the way others compared weather forecasts. Within weeks, I sensed something changing inside Nathan. He laughed louder around wealthy friends. He spoke differently. He started correcting my manners during parties. "Ariana," he'd whisper through a forced smile, "don't mention community center work. It sounds small." Small? The children I taught had survived foster care, family struggles, learning disabilities, and loss. Helping them discover confidence through painting was never small. But I stayed quiet, because I still believed patience could rescue a drifting marriage. The person who admired Nathan's new lifestyle more than anyone else was Vanessa Hale. Elegant, confident, flawlessly dressed. She organized charity galas that somehow seemed designed more for photographers than for helping people. Whenever she entered a room, conversations shifted toward her. Nathan noticed. Everyone noticed. At first, I thought she simply enjoyed attention. Then I began noticing how often she laughed, only after Nathan spoke. How she lightly touched his arm. How he suddenly volunteered for every committee she chaired. One evening after a fundraiser, I asked casually, "Do you think Vanessa likes you?" Nathan chuckled. "She's friendly with everyone." Something inside me wanted to believe him. Another part quietly began paying attention. Around the same time, Grandma Eleanor started calling more often. She asked unusual questions. "Are you happy? Do you feel respected? Are you still keeping the journal safe?" I laughed. "Grandma, are you writing a mystery novel?" Her voice softened. "No, sweetheart." She paused. "I'm just hoping life gives you enough time before difficult choices arrive." Those words stayed with me long after we hung up. 6 weeks later, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was small, exactly as she requested. Nathan attended, but spent most of the afternoon checking work emails. I stood alone beside the grave after everyone left. The autumn wind carried fallen leaves across the cemetery. For reasons I couldn't explain, I suddenly remembered the journal. That evening I retrieved it from the old cedar chest beneath our bed. Inside were handwritten stories about resilience, generosity, and family history. Tucked into the final pages was a sealed envelope. Across the front, in Grandma Eleanor's handwriting, were only 7 words. "Open only when your life completely changes." I smiled sadly, then returned it to the journal. I wasn't ready. Nathan, however, seemed increasingly ready for a completely different life. He came home later. Business dinners became routine. Weekend conferences multiplied. Phone calls ended whenever I entered the room. His patience with me disappeared almost overnight. One Sunday morning I burned toast. He sighed dramatically. "You really don't understand pressure." I stared at him. "It's breakfast." "No," he snapped. "It's about standards." Standards. The word echoed through the kitchen. When had love become an evaluation? Then came the anniversary dinner. 12 years together. I reserved our favorite little Italian restaurant, the one where he'd proposed. He texted an hour before. "Can't make it. Important client meeting. Sorry." I sat alone anyway. The owner recognized me. He brought complimentary dessert. I'm sure something urgent came up. I smiled politely, but halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed. A photo from social media. Nathan wasn't with clients. He was attending Vanessa's rooftop birthday celebration, standing beside her, holding a champagne glass, smiling the smile I hadn't seen in months. For the first time in 12 years, I cried in public. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly enough that the waitress pretended not to notice. The next morning, Nathan apologized. Sort of. It wasn't what it looked like. What did it look like? A networking event. You forgot our anniversary. I forgot the date. I searched his face, looking for guilt. Instead, I found irritation, as though my disappointment inconvenienced him. Something shifted inside me, very slightly, the kind of shift you barely notice until much later. Weeks became months. The emotional distance widened. Then came the first accusation. "You've become negative." I laughed in disbelief. "I'm reacting to being ignored." "No." He shook his head. "You've lost your drive." "Drive?" I still volunteered. Still taught children. Still organized neighborhood food drives. Still cared for both of us. What Nathan really meant was something different. I no longer impressed the people he wanted to impress. One rainy afternoon, I stopped by his office unexpectedly, with homemade soup, because he'd mentioned feeling sick. The receptionist looked confused. I thought he left already. He told me he had meetings. She frowned. "I don't think so." I thanked her and walked away before asking another question. Across the street, parked outside an upscale cafe, I saw Nathan. Vanessa sat across from him. Neither noticed me. They weren't discussing business. They were laughing, really laughing, the kind of effortless laughter couples share. I walked home in the rain, not because I enjoyed suffering, because I needed time before deciding what to say. That evening I asked him directly, "Are you having an affair?" He looked offended. "Seriously? Answer me." "No." He didn't hesitate. He didn't look away. His confidence almost convinced me. Almost. Life settled into a painful routine, built on unanswered questions. Until one afternoon, 3 months later, everything collapsed. Nathan asked me to come home early from the community center. "I want to talk." His tone felt strangely formal. When I arrived, Vanessa was sitting in my living room, wearing one of my favorite shades of burgundy, holding a cup of coffee, like she belonged there. Nathan remained standing, his hands folded, his expression empty. "We need to be honest." I didn't sit down. "I'm listening." He inhaled deeply. "Our marriage has been over for a long time." "No," I answered quietly. "Our communication has." Vanessa exchanged a glance with him. Nathan continued, "I've fallen in love with someone else." Silence. Real silence. The kind that makes clocks sound unbearably loud. I looked at Vanessa. She didn't lower her eyes. Instead, she offered a sympathetic smile that somehow felt more insulting than cruelty. "I'm sorry," she said softly. No, she wasn't. Nathan walked toward the hallway and returned carrying 2 suitcases. Mine. Already packed. "I think it's better if you leave." I blinked. "This is our home. I've spoken with my attorney." He avoided my eyes. "You'll receive the paperwork." My voice barely emerged. "You packed my clothes before telling me?" It avoids unnecessary conflict. Conflict? He had invited another woman into our marriage before inviting me into the conversation. I looked around the house. Every photograph, every painting, every flower I'd planted outside the windows, every birthday celebrated, every Christmas decorated together, reduced to luggage. Vanessa stood silently behind him, almost waiting, as though she expected applause for her patience. Nathan opened the front door. "I think this is best." Outside, neighbors had begun slowing their cars. Curtains moved. People watched. Humiliation rarely happens in private. I carried my suitcase toward the driveway. My old leather journal slipped from the side pocket and landed on the pavement. The sealed envelope slid halfway out. Nathan glanced down briefly before looking away. He didn't recognize it. To him, it was only another old notebook belonging to a woman he had already decided was insignificant. I picked it up carefully, brushed away the dust. For reasons I couldn't explain, my hands trembled. Not because I was losing my home, because I suddenly remembered Grandma Eleanor's final instruction. Open only when your life completely changes. Standing outside the house where 12 years of marriage had just ended, I slowly broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. Beneath it rested a single brass key, engraved with an unfamiliar crest. The first line stopped my breathing. If you are reading this, Ariana, the family trustees have finally released your inheritance, and it's time for you to learn who Eleanor Brooks truly was. Ariana read the first sentence 3 times before the words began to make sense. Her grandmother had never been an ordinary retired librarian. Eleanor Brooks had been the last living chairwoman of the privately held Eleanor Heritage Trust, a family investment organization founded nearly a century earlier. Rather than living publicly as one of the country's wealthiest women, Eleanor had deliberately chosen a quiet life devoted to education, libraries, and community service. The trust's rules were unlike anything Ariana had ever imagined. Every heir had to build an independent life first. No one would receive control simply because of bloodline. The trustees watched each generation, not to judge success by income, but by character. The letter explained why Eleanor had insisted Ariana never reveal their family history. Wealth attracts admiration that isn't always genuine, Eleanor had written, but hardship reveals who truly stands beside you. Attached to the letter was an invitation to meet the trustees the following morning. Ariana looked back at the house. Nathan had already closed the front door. The place where she'd spent 12 years had disappeared behind polished wood and expensive curtains. She whispered softly, "I guess my life really has changed." That night, she checked into a modest hotel. Not because she couldn't afford better, she still hadn't processed what she'd learned, but because it felt familiar. She sat by the window with the journal resting on her lap. For hours, she cried. Not because of the inheritance, not because of the house. She cried for the woman she'd been, the woman who kept making excuses for someone who had stopped choosing her, long ago. She wasn't mourning her marriage anymore. She was mourning the years she'd spent believing love required shrinking herself. By sunrise, something inside her felt different. The pain remained, but beneath it was something steadier. Resolve. The following morning, a black sedan arrived outside the hotel. The driver greeted her respectfully. "Ms. Brooks?" She nodded. "The trustees are expecting you." The vehicle carried her beyond the city, toward a quiet estate, surrounded by ancient oak trees. There were no gold gates, no marble fountains, just understated elegance. Inside, she met 3 elderly trustees who had known Eleanor for decades. One of them, Margaret Sinclair, smiled warmly. "Your grandmother spoke about you often." Ariana swallowed hard. "I wish she'd told me." Margaret shook her head gently. "She wanted you to discover whether people valued your heart before they discovered your last name." She slid several folders across the table. The trust controls investments in renewable energy, publishing, healthcare research, affordable housing, and educational foundations. Ariana stared silently. Margaret continued. "The estimated value currently exceeds several $billions." The room became very quiet. Then Margaret added something unexpected. "But that isn't why you're here." For the next several hours, Ariana wasn't shown luxury homes or private aircraft. Instead, she was introduced to the Foundation's projects: scholarships, children's hospitals, domestic violence shelters, community art programs, libraries, small business grants. Everything Eleanor had quietly supported without seeking recognition. Margaret looked directly at Ariana. "Your grandmother believed wealth is only meaningful when it improves someone else's tomorrow." For the first time since Eleanor's funeral. Ariana smiled. "I think I understand her now." Meanwhile, Nathan believed his future had never looked brighter. Within weeks, Vanessa had moved into the house. She immediately began replacing Ariana's furniture. The family photographs disappeared. The vegetable garden was removed to make room for decorative landscaping. The cozy reading corner Ariana had created became a luxury wine display. Nathan convinced himself he had upgraded his life. At first, everything felt exciting. Dinner parties, networking events, expensive vacations, social media photos, the attention he'd always wanted. But excitement isn't the same as peace. He soon discovered Vanessa expected a lifestyle that cost far more than appearances suggested. She encouraged expensive renovations, luxury memberships, designer shopping trips, private clubs. Nathan's salary looked impressive on paper. It wasn't enough to support the image they were trying to maintain. Credit card balances quietly grew. Arguments quietly followed. One afternoon, Nathan received surprising news. His company announced a restructuring. His department would be merged. His promotion disappeared. His income dropped significantly. The confidence he'd built around professional success suddenly began to crack. Vanessa wasn't sympathetic. "You'll figure it out." Nathan laughed nervously. "I thought we were partners." She looked at him calmly. "I prefer stability." The words sounded strangely familiar. He couldn't remember where he'd heard them before. Then he realized. Years earlier, he had used almost those exact words while criticizing Ariana. For the first time, the irony hurt. Across town, Ariana was rebuilding a different kind of life. She declined magazine interviews. She refused publicity. Instead, she accepted Eleanor's role overseeing the family's charitable foundation. She visited schools, shelters, neighborhood art centers. She expanded scholarship programs for young women pursuing creative careers. Every decision reflected something Eleanor had taught her. Money could build buildings. Character built communities. News outlets occasionally mentioned the mysterious new chairwoman of the Brooks Foundation. Few people recognized her. That anonymity suited Ariana perfectly. Several months later, the community center, where Ariana had once volunteered, faced closure due to funding shortages. Without hesitation, the foundation purchased the building. Not to rename it after herself, but to keep it open. The children never knew who had saved it. Watching them laugh through the windows one afternoon brought Ariana more happiness than any luxury purchase ever could. Margaret noticed. "Your grandmother would be proud." Ariana smiled softly. I finally understand what she meant. Life, however, has an unusual way of reconnecting people whose paths once separated. Nearly a year after the divorce was finalized, Nathan attended a regional charity gala hoping to rebuild professional relationships. The event featured the announcement of a major educational initiative, funded by an anonymous donor. Nathan entered the ballroom wearing his best suit. Vanessa accompanied him. Their smiles looked polished. Their relationship did not. As guests gathered around the stage, the host smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the new chairwoman of the Brooks Foundation." Nathan applauded politely. Then the spotlight found Ariana. She stepped onto the stage wearing an elegant navy gown. Simple, confident, graceful, not extravagant, just unmistakably herself. Nathan froze. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Ariana thanked educators, volunteers, and community leaders before speaking about opportunity, dignity, and compassion. She never mentioned wealth, never mentioned betrayal, never mentioned divorce. She spoke only about hope. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Nathan remained seated, unable to process what he was seeing. Later that evening, Margaret quietly approached Nathan. "You knew Eleanor's granddaughter." Nathan frowned. "I'm sorry?" Margaret nodded toward Ariana. "She often speaks kindly about the years before everything changed." Nathan felt the room spinning. "Granddaughter?" Margaret smiled gently. Eleanor always believed Ariana's greatest strength wasn't her inheritance. She paused. It was her heart. Only then did Nathan understand. He hadn't lost access to money. He had lost someone whose character couldn't be measured by money at all. Nathan approached Ariana near the garden terrace. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, he whispered, "I didn't know." Ariana looked at him calmly. "I know. If I had," she gently interrupted. "That's exactly the point." Silence settled between them. "You treated me according to who you believed I was." Nathan lowered his eyes. "I made the biggest mistake of my life. I think," Ariana replied softly. "The biggest mistake wasn't leaving." He looked up hopefully. She continued, "It was forgetting how you treated the person who loved you before success became your identity." Those words carried no anger, only truth. Sometimes, truth hurts more than accusation. Vanessa watched from across the room. She realized there would be no dramatic confrontation, no revenge speech, no humiliation, only quiet dignity. And somehow, that felt even more powerful. Within months, she and Nathan separated. Not because Ariana had caused it, but because relationships built on appearances rarely survive reality. As the years passed, the Brooks Foundation expanded across the country. Libraries reopened. Scholarships multiplied. Community art centers flourished. Ariana often visited projects anonymously, sitting quietly among children painting colorful murals. Whenever someone thanked the foundation, she simply smiled. The recognition belonged to Eleanor's vision, as much as her own. One afternoon, while organizing old belongings, Ariana found the leather journal again. Tucked inside was one final handwritten note she had somehow overlooked. "If you ever become wealthy, remember this. People will admire what you own, but the right people will treasure who you are when you own nothing at all." Ariana closed the journal and looked out the window, where children were laughing in the foundation's newly renovated garden. She finally understood. Nathan hadn't thrown away a billionaire heiress. He had thrown away a woman who would have stood beside him through every season of life, and that loss could never be measured in dollars. Sometimes the greatest justice isn't watching someone regret losing you. It's becoming someone whose happiness no longer depends on whether they ever do. If this story touched your heart, remember this. Never let someone else's opinion convince you that your kindness is weakness. The people who truly deserve a place in your life will value your character long before they discover your success. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more emotionally powerful stories about resilience, healing, and second chances.